I'm Chloe, 27 years old, and 2 months ago I found out my parents had been secretly stealing from me for 5 years, over $200,000. Money my grandmother sent to help me through hard times, gone. Spent on new cars, luxury furniture, and vacations I never knew about. I thought that was the worst of it. Until the family dinner. That night, my grandmother exposed everything, the lies, the betrayal, the stolen trust funds. And sitting at that dining table, I realized my whole childhood had been built on secrets. What happened next? It shattered our family and changed my life forever. Before I tell you exactly how it all unraveled, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever experienced family drama like this, hit like and subscribe. Because trust me, this story only gets messier from here. So, let's rewind a bit. Growing up, I always knew my grandma Eleanor was wealthy. Not just comfortable, not just well off, but genuinely, profoundly rich. Her late husband, my grandfather, had built a colossal tech startup empire back in the day, and Eleanor had managed it after his passing. Their home? It wasn't just a house. It was a sprawling estate nestled in the most exclusive part of town, with meticulously manicured gardens, a fountain that looked like it belonged in a European palace, and a staff that had been with her for literally decades. Maria, her housekeeper, had been there since my dad was a kid. My parents, Brenda and David Hayes, they lived a solidly middle-class life. David was a logistics manager for a local firm, and Mom, Brenda, was a guidance counselor at the high school. They weren't struggling by any means, but their lifestyle was a stark contrast to Grandma Eleanor's opulence. And that's where the off feeling started, even when I was little. From my earliest memories, there was just something off about how my parents interacted with Grandma. Mom would always plaster on this super bright smile, but it never, ever reached her eyes. It was like a mask. And Dad? He'd become unusually quiet, almost, dare I say, submissive in her presence. As a child, I just thought, oh, this is how adults behave, right? It's just formality. But as I got older, I started noticing the undercurrent, the simmering resentment, especially from my mother. Your grandmother thinks her money makes her better than everyone, Mom would mutter under her breath, usually after one of those family gatherings at Eleanor's estate. She's always lorded it over your father and me, our entire marriage. It was a constant refrain, whispered behind cupped hands, often with a dismissive wave towards Eleanor's generosity, which seemed to sting Mom more than help. Despite my mother's attitude, Grandma Eleanor and I, we were always incredibly close. She was my confidant, my biggest champion. She taught me to paint when I was 7, showing me how colors could speak without words. She bought me my first professional camera when I showed even a fleeting interest in photography at 13, seeing a creative spark before I even did. And she fully supported my decision to study digital marketing instead of the more practical business degree my parents had pushed for. Follow what ignites you, Chloe, she told me during my senior year of high school, while my parents were arguing that I needed a sensible, marketable degree. Life is too short to live it for someone else's approval. Your passion is your purpose. That conversation, those words, resonated deeply. They became my mantra. My siblings, though, they had very different relationships with Grandma. Liam, my older brother, he kept his distance. He worked in biotech research, just as our father had always subtly wanted for him. Liam seemed determined to make his own way, completely independent of Grandma's influence, almost aggressively so. Sophie, my younger sister, she was polite, almost excessively so, but very distant with Grandma, much like Mom. She followed Mom's example of stiff formality, a forced politeness that always felt brittle. After college, I poured myself into building my digital marketing business. It started modestly, but it was growing steadily. I had secured several regular clients, enough to afford a small apartment in the city, and conscientiously pay down my student loans. I was finally feeling like I had a handle on things, building something from the ground up, entirely on my own terms. Then, of course, the world changed. The global downturn hit, and it hit hard. My biggest client, a chain of event venues that accounted for almost 70% of my monthly income, canceled all contracts indefinitely. Just like that. Poof. One day I was stable. The next I was staring at my rent bill, wondering how I was going to make it work. Suddenly, I was truly struggling to make ends meet. I never told my family about my financial troubles. Mom and Dad had always been so critical of my career choice, constantly hinting that I should have pursued something more stable, something more lucrative. I just couldn't bear the thought of their inevitable "I told you so" lectures, their triumphant, smug expressions. Liam was deep in his own financial stresses, trying to navigate layoffs in his company and the fallout from a bad investment. Sophie was still finishing her master's degree in environmental science and truly had no money to spare, even if I'd wanted to burden her. The only person I confided in was Grandma Eleanor. I visited her one quiet afternoon, hoping for advice more than anything else. Maybe some wisdom, a different perspective. Instead, she insisted on helping. "Let me support you until you get back on your feet, darling," she said firmly. Her eyes kind but unwavering. "That's what family is for, isn't it? To lift each other up when we stumble." I reluctantly accepted what I honestly believed was a one-time gift, just enough to cover a few months of rent and groceries, a temporary bridge. Little did I know, what was actually happening behind the scenes was something far more insidious, something that would unravel everything. In the months that followed, I started noticing my parents behaving strangely. Whenever Grandma Eleanor called, or if her name was even mentioned in conversation, Mom would suddenly find urgent reasons to leave the room. "Oh, the laundry," or "Did I leave the oven on?" And Dad? He would become intensely, almost unnaturally interested in whatever was on television at the time, his eyes glued to the screen, even if it was just static. I initially just chalked it up to their usual awkwardness around the topic of Grandma's wealth. They never liked talking about money, especially hers. It seemed to make them uncomfortable, and I had simply learned to accept that as their normal. The day of the fateful dinner finally arrived. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air smells like fallen leaves and wood smoke. I parked my 7-year-old Nissan behind my father's shiny new Tesla, which I'd been quite surprised to see him driving about 3 months earlier. "Just taking advantage of those 0% financing deals. You know how it is," he'd explained vaguely when I asked about the drastic upgrade from his sensible old sedan. It had seemed odd then, but I dismissed it. The house I grew up in also looked different. Not just cleaner, but transformed. New elaborate landscaping adorned the front yard, plants I'd never seen before, and as I walked in, I noticed the living room had been entirely redecorated, with expensive-looking modern furniture. Brenda, my mother, was practically beaming. "Do you like it?" she asked, gesturing around proudly with a sweep of her hand. We decided it was time to treat ourselves a little. "It looks incredible," I said, genuinely impressed, but also a little bewildered. How exactly were a high school guidance counselor and a mid-level logistics manager suddenly splurging on luxury items? "Business must be good." "We're getting by," Dad said a little too quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Can I get you a drink, Chloe?" As I sipped the expensive wine Dad poured, which was definitely not their usual mid-range brand, I wandered around, noticing even more upgrades. A brand new kitchen, gleaming with marble countertops, and high-end stainless steel appliances that practically sparkled under newly installed recessed lighting. Designer light fixtures throughout the house. My parents had always been so financially cautious, meticulous with their budgets, clipping coupons, always opting for store brands. This sudden, inexplicable display of wealth didn't add up. It felt wrong. Liam arrived next, immediately heading for the liquor cabinet and pouring himself a generous glass of single malt scotch. He'd been drinking more since some of his recent career disappointments, but tonight he seemed particularly intent on numbing himself, a desperate look in his eyes. "Big day at work?" I asked, trying to make casual conversation, break the weird atmosphere. "Something like that," he muttered, still avoiding eye contact, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Is Grandma here yet?" His voice was laced with an unfamiliar anxiety. Sophie was the last to arrive before Grandma, rushing in with her eyes glued to her phone. Her thumbs flying over the screen with urgent, almost frantic energy. She barely looked up to greet anyone, just a quick, distracted nod. "Everything okay?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "Fine, just school stuff," she said dismissively, though I knew her master's program was technically on break. She too seemed on edge, almost as if she were bracing for something unpleasant to happen. Something I couldn't quite grasp. The atmosphere in the house was stifling, thick with unspoken tension. Mom kept disappearing into the kitchen to check on dinner, even though the timer hadn't gone off yet. Dad repeatedly straightened the already perfect place settings on the dining table, fussing with the napkins. Liam poured his second drink before the first was half finished. Sophie couldn't stop checking her phone, her gaze darting furtively down every few seconds. Something was definitely wrong with my family, and I had this cold, undeniable feeling that I was about to find out exactly what. At exactly 6 p.m., the doorbell chimed. Grandma Eleanor was nothing if not punctual, almost religiously so. Dad practically hurried to answer it, while Mom frantically gave us last-minute instructions, her voice a strained whisper. Everyone smile, best behavior, not a word about the kitchen remodel. Grandma entered like royalty, elegant and poised in a tailored navy suit, her signature pearl necklace gleaming softly at her throat. At 78, she stood straight as an arrow, her silver hair perfectly styled, radiating the quiet confidence of a woman who had navigated decades of complex business deals and intricate social hierarchies. Brenda, she nodded at my mother, with cool, almost formal politeness. David, a slightly warmer tone to my father. Then her face lit up when she saw me, a genuine warmth spreading across her features. Chloe, darling. She embraced me warmly, her familiar scent of gardenia and old books enveloping me like a cherished childhood memory. I noticed the subtle stiffening of my mother's shoulders at this public display of affection, a familiar flash of irritation. Liam, you're looking thin. Are you eating properly? Grandma asked, patting his cheek lightly. Liam forced a tight smile, the ice in his glass clinking nervously. He was already on his third scotch. Working hard, Grandma, he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. Sophie, put that phone away when you're greeting your grandmother, Mom hissed, her voice sharp with exasperation. Sophie reluctantly slipped the device into her pocket, offering Grandma a practiced, almost robotic smile. Sorry, Grandma, school project deadline. During your break, dear? Grandma raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, and in that moment I realized with a jolt that she knew Sophie was lying. Nothing, absolutely nothing, got past Eleanor Vance. Mom ushered us all to the dining room, where she had truly outdone herself with the spread. A succulent lamb roast, cooked to perfection, surrounded by truffle mashed potatoes, crisp asparagus with hollandaise, freshly baked artisan rolls. Crystal glasses sparkled under the new chandelier, and the good china, typically reserved only for major holidays, adorned the table. You've gone to quite some trouble, Brenda, Grandma observed casually, her gaze lingering on the expensive wine bottles and the elaborate floral centerpiece. Special occasion, Mom replied quickly, her smile tight, a vein throbbing faintly in her temple. Just wanted to make it nice. Family is everything after all. We took our seats, Dad at one end, Grandma at the other, a physical representation of the power dynamic that had subtly defined our family for decades. Mom served the food with visibly shaking hands, dropping a roll on the floor and apologizing profusely, her face flushing crimson. The house looks different, Brenda, Grandma remarked again, her tone conversational, as she delicately cut her meat. New furniture, just a few pieces, Mom answered quickly, a little too quickly. Nothing special. And David, that's a new car in the driveway, isn't it? Dad nearly choked on his wine. Great deal, end-of-year clearance. Grandma nodded slowly, her eyes revealing nothing but a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Liam, how is the biotech research going? Made senior researcher yet? Liam stared into his fourth drink. On track, Grandma. Just need to land a few more big grants. And you, Sophie? The master's program in environmental science is going well? Sophie nodded too enthusiastically, her eyes wide. Absolutely. Top of my class. I watched this strange exchange with growing unease, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Everyone was performing, putting on a show. But for whose benefit? And why were my parents so incredibly nervous about their recent purchases, their new lifestyle? The conversation moved to safer topics, neighborhood news, the upcoming charity gala, the weather forecast. But the relentless undercurrent of tension remained, intensifying with each passing minute. Mom kept glancing at Dad, who seemed to be sweating despite the comfortable temperature in the room. Liam drank steadily, his words becoming slightly slurred. Sophie kept checking her phone under the table, convinced no one was looking. I sat in confused silence, sensing that I was missing something monumentally significant, something that was about to explode. By the time Mom brought out dessert, an elaborate creme brulee that was definitely not her usual recipe, and far too fancy. The tension in the room was unbearable. It hummed in the air, a palpable force. Something I knew instinctively was about to break, and it would change our family forever. As Mom served the creme brulee with trembling hands, Grandma Eleanor dabbed her lips meticulously with her napkin and turned her full attention to me. The conversation had momentarily lulled, a dangerous, fragile silence settling over the table. And in that silence, Grandma spoke the words that would detonate our family's carefully constructed facade. "Chloe, darling, I've been meaning to ask you," she said, her voice casual, almost conversational, but her eyes were sharp, piercing. "Is the $20,500 I send you every month enough? If you need more while you're rebuilding your business, you only need to ask." The creme brulee spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I blinked, certain I had misheard. What money? The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush new carpet in the dining room. Everyone at the table turned to stare at my parents, whose faces drained of color so rapidly, it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, gasping for air. Dad suddenly found the intricate pattern on his dessert plate utterly fascinating. "What money, Grandma?" I repeated, my voice stronger now, looking back and forth between her and my ashen-faced parents. Grandma's eyes never left my mother's face, her expression hardening into granite, cold and unyielding. "Brenda, perhaps you'd like to explain why Chloe doesn't know about the monthly allowance I've been providing for her since she told me about her financial difficulties." Mom let out a high-pitched laugh that sounded more like a cry of pain, a desperate, hysterical sound. "Oh, Mother, there's been a misunderstanding." "Is there?" Grandma cut her off coldly, her voice chilling the air. "Because my bank statements show that for the past 5 years, I've been transferring $2,500 monthly to an account you specifically told me was Chloe's emergency fund. You specifically said she needed help with medical bills after being diagnosed with a chronic condition." My jaw dropped. "Medical condition? I'm perfectly healthy. I hadn't had so much as a cold in years." Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with a desperate plea. "Eleanor, we can explain." "I certainly hope so, David," Grandma replied, her voice like ice, each word cutting through the tension. "Because from where I'm sitting, it appears you and Brenda have been taking money intended for your daughter and spending it on yourselves." Liam let out a low whistle and poured himself another drink, his eyes wide with a sudden dawning realization. Sophie had gone completely still, her phone forgotten on the table beside her uneaten dessert. "Mom? Dad?" I looked at them, silently begging for a reasonable explanation, a loophole, anything that could make sense of this insanity. "What is Grandma talking about?" Mom's face crumpled, then hardened, years of resentment breaking through her carefully constructed facade. "You've always been her favorite," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "Always getting special treatment, special attention. Why shouldn't we get some benefit from that?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "You've been stealing money meant for me, for 5 years?" Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed, his gaze fixed on his plate. "It wasn't stealing exactly. We're your parents. We supported you your whole life." "Brenda!" Grandma's voice cut through the tension like a knife, sharp and precise. "How much money have you taken that was intended for Chloe?" Mom lifted her chin defiantly, tears now streaming down her face, but her eyes burned with fury. "We deserve it. After everything we've done, raising 3 children isn't cheap, Eleanor." "How much?" Grandma repeated, each word carved from ice, unyielding. Dad sighed heavily, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders, his voice barely audible. "About $150,000 over the past 5 years. The room spun around me. $150,000. Money that could have paid off my entire student loan debt. Money that could have helped me through the business downturn without taking on crippling credit card debt. Money that could have changed everything." "And this past year," Grandma continued her interrogation, her voice cold and steady, "when Chloe specifically told me she was struggling financially after losing her major client." Mom's defensive mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw panic in her eyes, before she composed herself with a shaky breath. "We were going to tell her eventually." "Tell me what?" I demanded, my voice rising, an unfamiliar anger bubbling inside me. "What else have you done?" "When you confided in me about your business troubles," Grandma explained, her eyes full of a profound sympathy for me. I immediately increased the monthly amount to $6,000. Your mother assured me it was going directly into your account to help you stay afloat during this difficult period. Another $75,000 gone, spent on kitchen remodels and new Teslas and expensive furniture. All while I had been eating ramen noodles for dinner, skipping meals, and worrying about eviction notices, staring at my empty bank account. How could you? I whispered, tears finally welling in my eyes, blurring my vision. Your own daughter? You don't understand the pressure we've been under, Mom said defensively, her voice cracking. Your father's company has been downsizing. My school district froze raises years ago. We have appearances to maintain, Eleanor. A certain standard of living. Appearances? I echoed incredulously, the word a bitter taste in my mouth. You stole from me to keep up appearances? We did not steal, Mom insisted, color returning to her face in angry, blotchy patches. We redirected family funds. Everything stays in the family. Except it wasn't yours to redirect, Brenda, Grandma stated firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. That money was explicitly for Chloe. The full weight of their betrayal crushed down on me, a physical blow. My own parents. They had watched me struggle, stress, nearly lose my apartment, all while sitting on money that was specifically meant to help me. Money they were actively using for luxury purchases and lifestyle upgrades. Did you ever intend to tell me? I asked, my voice barely audible, choked with emotion. The silence that followed was the answer, a resounding, damning silence. I can't believe this is happening, I said, pushing my dessert away. My appetite completely gone, a wave of nausea washing over me. 5 years. You've been lying and stealing from me for 5 years. Mom's defensive posture intensified, her jaw tight. It's not stealing when it's family. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We paid for your education. Actually, I paid for her education, Grandma interjected, her voice sharp with a sudden, fierce anger. The trust fund I established covered tuition for all 3 grandchildren. I turned to Grandma in utter confusion. Trust fund? What trust fund? A look of grim understanding passed over Grandma's face, a terrible realization dawning in her eyes. You never told her about the education trust either, did you, Brenda? Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding eye contact. We didn't want the children getting entitled ideas about family money, Eleanor. What your mother means, Grandma explained to me, her voice tightly controlled, is that I set up trusts for each of my grandchildren to cover higher education costs. Your parents were the trustees until you turned 25, at which point control should have transferred directly to you. My head was spinning, my world tilting on its axis. So my student loans, they should not exist? Grandma finished, her voice tight with suppressed fury. The money was there to pay your tuition in full. I turned to my parents, speechless with shock, my mind reeling. I had been working 2 jobs through college to minimize my loans, eating ramen and living with 4 roommates just to save money, always worried about every penny, all while a trust fund, specifically meant for my education, sat untouched. Where did that money go? I finally managed to ask, the words barely escaping my lips. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. We had some investments that didn't pan out. You gambled away my education fund? The betrayal cut deeper with each new revelation, twisting the knife. It wasn't gambling, Mom snapped, her voice shrill. It was a legitimate business opportunity. Which failed, Grandma stated flatly, cutting through Mom's desperate justification. And rather than admit your mistake and ask for help, you let your daughter take on debt that she shouldn't have had. Liam suddenly laughed, a short, bitter sound, slightly slurred from the alcohol. Classic Mom and Dad. Let me guess. You did the same with my trust. The guilty look that flashed between our parents, a silent, damning exchange, told us everything we needed to know. You've got to be kidding me, Liam said, setting his glass down hard enough that scotch sloshed over the rim, his face now a mask of furious disbelief. I've been killing myself at that soul-sucking biotech job to pay off my student loans. And you had access to money specifically for my education? Liam, you don't understand why, Dad began, his voice weak. Oh, I understand perfectly. Liam cut him off, his voice rising in fury. I understand why you pushed me so hard into biotech now. You needed someone in the family who could actually make money, since you two are so bad with it. Sophie had gone completely pale, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "What about my trust?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "Is that why you keep telling me my graduate program is too expensive and I should drop out?" Mom and Dad exchanged another guilty look. "Oh my God," Sophie whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It's gone too, isn't it?" "We were going to replace it," Dad said weakly, desperately. "We had a plan." "A plan?" I echoed incredulously, the absurdity of it all hitting me. "Was your plan to keep stealing from Grandma indefinitely?" "We did not steal," Mom slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump, a desperate, almost animalistic cry. "Everything we did was for this family, to maintain our standard of living, to give you children opportunities." "Opportunities?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You stole my education fund, then watched me struggle with student loans for years. You took monthly payments meant for me and spent them on granite countertops while I worried about making rent. What opportunities were you providing exactly?" The facade finally cracked. Mom's composure shattered completely, and tears streamed down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse, I realized with growing horror. They were tears of pure, unadulterated frustration at being caught. "You have no idea what it's like," she sobbed, her voice raw with self-pity. "Living in Eleanor's shadow all these years, nothing we do is ever enough. We're never good enough, never rich enough, never successful enough. So you stole from your children to keep up appearances?" Grandma's voice was cold, filled with a deep, crushing disgust. "I expected better from you, Brenda. And you, David. You stood by and allowed this to happen?" Dad seemed to shrink in his chair, a defeated man. "We were going to fix things before the kids found out." "How exactly were you planning to replace over $100,000? Liam asked skeptically, his voice laced with venom. "We had investments," Mom insisted through her tears, her voice clinging to a desperate hope. "They just needed time to mature. The same brilliant investments that lost our education funds in the first place?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "You don't understand what it's like." Mom's voice rose hysterically again, always being compared to Eleanor's perfect family, always coming up short. "We deserved some comfort, some security." "At your children's expense?" Grandma asked quietly, her eyes sorrowful. "Is that the legacy you wanted to leave, Brenda? Stealing from one generation to fund your own comforts?" "It's easy for you to judge," Mom shot back, her rage momentarily overriding her tears. "You've never had to worry about money a day in your life." Grandma's laugh was short and harsh, devoid of humor. "You know nothing about my life, Brenda. I worked alongside your father-in-law for 40 years building that tech company. I kept the books, managed the properties, negotiated the deals, all while raising your husband. Nothing was handed to me, not one thing." The room fell silent as decades of family mythology crumbled around us. Mom had always portrayed Grandma Eleanor as a privileged socialite, someone who had simply married into wealth and lived a life of ease. The reality that she had been an active working partner in building the family fortune rewrote the entire narrative I'd grown up with. "I think," Grandma said carefully, folding her napkin with precise movements and placing it beside her untouched dessert, "that this dinner is over, and so is my financial support of you, Brenda, and David." Mom's tear-streaked face turned desperate, horrified. "Eleanor, please, you can't." "I can and I will," Grandma cut her off, her voice firm, resolute. "You've betrayed not only me, but your own children. From this moment forward, any financial assistance I provide will go directly to my grandchildren, no exceptions, no intermediaries." "We'll lose everything," Dad whispered, the reality of their situation finally hitting him, his face ashen. "Perhaps you should have considered that before spending money that wasn't yours," Grandma replied without sympathy, her gaze unwavering. She turned to me then, her expression softening, a genuine regret in her eyes. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. I should have verified where the money was going. This is partly my failure as well." I couldn't speak. The magnitude of the betrayal was too overwhelming, too encompassing. These people, my parents, had watched me struggle financially for years, had seen my anxiety, my stress, my hard work, all while actively stealing money meant to help me. They had let me believe I was alone in my financial troubles, while secretly benefiting from funds intended for my security, for my future. Without a single word, I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked out the front door. Behind me, I could hear Mom calling my name, her voice shrill and desperate, but I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see their faces, couldn't bear to hear another word of their pathetic justifications. As I started my Nissan, I caught a glimpse of my family through the dining room window. Mom crying dramatically, dissolving into theatrical sobs. Dad with his head in his hands, defeated. Liam pouring another drink, a grim look on his face. Sophie texting furiously, her face blank. And Grandma watching it all with regal disappointment, a deep sadness in her eyes. In that moment, I knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. For 3 days, I didn't answer my phone. The calls and texts piled up, mostly from my parents. Their messages evolved rapidly, from defensive, "You don't understand the whole situation," to desperate, "Please, we need to talk," to manipulative, "After everything we've done for you, you owe us a conversation." I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. The sheer audacity of their attempts to guilt me, after what they'd done, was infuriating. On the 4th day, Grandma Eleanor called. Unlike my parents, she left only one voicemail, her voice calm and steady, without a hint of demands or manipulation. "Chloe, when you're ready to talk, I'm here. No pressure, no timeline. I love you, darling." That simple message, free of any demands or guilt, brought me to tears, real tears, not the kind born of anger, but of relief and a profound sense of being seen and loved. I called her back that evening. "Can I come over?" I asked, my voice small and uncertain, still raw from the emotional fallout. "Of course, darling," she said warmly, instantly. "Maria will make your favorite lemon cookies." Grandma's house was a sanctuary, untouched by the chaos that had engulfed our family. The familiar scent of lemon and vanilla greeted me as Maria, Grandma's housekeeper of 30 years, ushered me into the sunroom, where Grandma waited with tea already poured, a comforting aroma filling the air. "I've been doing some investigating," Grandma said after our initial greetings. Never one to waste time on small talk when important matters needed addressing. "And I'm afraid what we discovered at dinner was just the tip of the iceberg." She slid a thick folder across the polished wooden table towards me. Inside were neatly organized bank statements, trust documents, and transfer records spanning back nearly a decade. "Your parents' financial deceptions go much deeper than we realized," she explained gently, her voice grim. "They've been systematically misappropriating funds intended for all 3 of you children since you were in high school." The documents told a damning, horrifying story. Not only had my parents emptied our education trusts and pocketed my monthly allowance, but they had also attempted similar schemes with Liam and Sophie, schemes I had never even dreamed of. "They told me Liam needed money for a down payment on his first house," Grandma explained, her finger tracing a line on a bank statement. "I sent $50,000 that apparently never reached him. They claimed Sophie needed help with medical bills after a car accident 3 years ago, an accident that, as far as I can tell, never even happened." My hands shook as I flipped through the papers, the weight of the evidence crushing me. Did Liam and Sophie know about any of this? "I've spoken with both of them," Grandma said, her gaze steady. "Liam suspected something was amiss when your parents bought that vacation condo the same month he was denied a loan for his house. He knew something was off, but he couldn't prove it. Sophie, though, she knew nothing. She's been completely in the dark, bless her heart." I felt sick to my stomach, a cold wave of nausea. "How much have they taken altogether, Grandma?" Grandma's face was grim, etched with sorrow. "Close to $500,000 over the past decade." The number was staggering, impossible to comprehend. My parents, the people who had always preached financial responsibility and hard work, who had lectured us about saving every penny, had been secretly siphoning off family money to fund their increasingly extravagant fake lifestyle. "There's something else you should know," Grandma continued carefully, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "Your student loans were paid off 4 years ago." I stared at her in utter confusion. "That's impossible. I make payments every month to an account your parents set up." "To an account your parents set up, yes," Grandma confirmed, pointing to a document. "The actual loans were paid in full from your trust fund, Chloe. That was one of the few legitimate uses they made of that money. The payments you've been making, that $600 monthly payment for 4 years, they've been going directly to your parents." The room seemed to tilt around me. For 4 years, I had been diligently sending $600 monthly to an account I believed was my student loan servicer, That was $2,800 of my hard-earned money. Money I had worked tirelessly for, straight into my parents' pockets. Why? I whispered. The betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible, reaching into the core of my being. Why would they do this to their own children? Grandma sighed heavily, a deep, weary sound. I believe your mother has been trying to maintain a lifestyle far beyond their means for many, many years. Your father, David, he goes along with it rather than confront her. They've been living on maxed-out credit cards, second mortgages, home equity loans, and whatever they could extract from the family, from me. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. The house you grew up in, the one you believed was the epitome of middle-class achievement, that was purchased with money I provided as a down payment, money they told me they had saved themselves. The perfect middle-class life I thought we had lived. It was all a carefully constructed illusion. A mirage built on layers of lies and theft. The realization was sickening. The next day, Liam called me. His voice, usually so boisterous and confident, was uncharacteristically subdued, almost somber. Did Grandma tell you everything? I think so, I replied, my voice still feeling numb. It's hard to believe it's real, Liam. It feels like a bad dream. I confronted Dad yesterday, Liam said, his voice raw. He broke down completely. They're in much worse shape than even Grandma knows. Second mortgage on the house, all the credit cards maxed out, personal loans they can't repay. They've been robbing Peter to pay Paul for years. And where's Peter? I said bitterly, the sarcasm unintentional. Exactly, Liam agreed. I think Mom has some kind of problem, Chloe. She just can't stop spending. And Dad, he enables it because he's too weak to stand up to her. He's always been afraid of Mom's outbursts. Later that evening, Sophie came to my apartment. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face blotchy. She curled up on my couch with a cup of tea, looking utterly heartbroken. I caught Mom in a lie 3 years ago, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Remember when she said Grandma had sent a gift for my 25th birthday, but it got lost in the mail? I nodded vaguely, recalling the incident. It had seemed odd at the time, but I hadn't thought much of it. Well, Sophie continued, a fresh wave of tears forming in her eyes. I called Grandma anyway to thank her, just in case, and she had no idea what I was talking about. When I confronted Mom, she made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would break up the family if I made a big deal about it. I was stupid enough to believe her. You weren't stupid, Soph, I assured her, reaching out to squeeze her hand. You trusted our mother, we all did. That's not stupidity, that's just being their children. The more we talked, the more the pieces fell into place. Small inconsistencies over the years, expensive purchases that didn't align with their income, the constant subtle pressure on all of us to succeed financially, to make something of ourselves, all while they were actively undermining our ability to do so, draining our resources from behind the scenes. It was a calculated, cruel manipulation. A week after the disastrous dinner, I finally agreed to meet my parents at their house. I needed answers, yes, but more than that, I needed to see them face to face, to look them in the eye and say what needed to be said. They looked terrible. Mom had lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Dad's face was haggard, with new lines etched around his mouth, his shoulders slumped. Chloe, Mom reached for me as I entered, but I instinctively stepped back, unable to bear her touch. Thank you for coming. We've been so worried. Worried about me, I asked coldly, my voice flat. Or worried about your financial house of cards collapsing. They ushered me into the living room, the very room with the expensive new furniture that had been bought with money meant for me. Money they had stolen. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. We know we've made terrible mistakes, Dad began, his voice trembling, barely audible. We never meant for things to go this far. How far did you think they would go? I asked, my voice controlled but cutting. Did you have an exit strategy, or were you just planning to keep stealing indefinitely? Mom flinched at the word stealing, but for the first time she didn't argue. We got caught up in it, she admitted, her voice raw. One small deception led to another, and before we knew it, we were in too deep to find a way out. So you just kept digging the hole deeper, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. And dragging your children down with you. Dad nodded miserably, defeated. The market crash hit my retirement fund hard. Then Brenda wanted to renovate the kitchen. Then we needed a new car. It was always just one more thing, one more time. We told ourselves we'd pay it all back eventually. With what money? I demanded, gesturing around at the house that suddenly seemed less like a home and more like a movie set, a carefully constructed facade with nothing substantial behind it. Your combined income hasn't changed significantly in years. How are you planning to replace hundreds of thousands of dollars? They exchanged a look that told me everything. There had never been a real plan, just a desperate, escalating cycle of lies and theft. Where did all the money go? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Mom burst into tears again, but this time they seemed less performative, more desperate. We're about to lose it all anyway. The bank called yesterday. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The credit cards are all maxed out. Your father's been denied for another loan. You've been living completely beyond your means, I realized aloud, the full sickening truth hitting me. For years. Dad nodded, utterly defeated, his eyes hollow. We kept thinking things would turn around, a promotion, an inheritance, something. So you gambled with your children's financial security while waiting for a windfall that never came? I summarized, disgust rising in my throat. And now that Grandma has cut you off, the whole house of cards is collapsing. We're going to lose the house, Mom whispered, fresh tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. Everything we've worked for, gone. I should have felt sympathy. These were my parents, after all. The people who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, nursed me through childhood illnesses, read me bedtime stories. But in this moment, all I could see were two selfish, manipulative people who had betrayed not just me, but my siblings and my grandmother as well. You didn't work for any of this, I said, standing up, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. You stole it, from your children, from Grandma, from everyone who trusted you. Chloe, please, Dad reached for my hand, his voice pleading. We're still your parents. We still love you. I pulled my hand away, recoiling from his touch. Love doesn't steal from people, Dad. Love doesn't watch someone struggle when you have the means to help them. Love doesn't lie to your face repeatedly for years on end. As I walked toward the door, Mom called after me, her voice ragged with despair. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us when we need you most? I turned back incredulous, the sheer audacity of her statement enraging me. You stole from me for years. You watched me stress about money, work multiple jobs, eat ramen for dinner, all while sitting on funds that were meant for me. And now you have the audacity to accuse me of abandoning you? The silence that followed was deafening. I'll be in touch when I'm ready, I said finally, my voice firm, setting a boundary I desperately needed. But don't call me, don't text me, and don't show up at my apartment. I need time to process all of this. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Mom collapse into sobs, and Dad's murmured comfort followed me down the driveway. For the first time in my life, I felt completely detached from the people who had raised me. I was on my own now. But perhaps, I realized, I always had been. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions. Grief for what I thought I had, anger at the deceit, disbelief at the depth of their betrayal, and eventually a strange, liberating sense of clarity. I threw myself into my work, taking on new clients and rebuilding my digital marketing business with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Without the constant weight of financial stress, without the low hum of anxiety about rent and bills, I found a new wellspring of creative energy for my designs and campaigns. Grandma Eleanor had been true to her word. The day after our tea, she had established a new monthly deposit directly to my account. This time with me as the sole account holder. No intermediaries, no one else had access. She had also transferred a lump sum that she calculated was roughly equivalent to what my parents had taken from me over the years, carefully itemized with the original trust fund amounts and the diverted allowances. This isn't charity, Chloe, she insisted gently when I tried to refuse, feeling overwhelmed. This is your birthright. Money that should have been yours all along. Take it, invest it. Use it to build the life you deserve, the life you've always worked so hard for. With those funds, I was able to move to a much better apartment in a safer neighborhood, upgrade my ancient computer and design software, and even hire a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks, freeing up more of my time for creative work. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just living paycheck to paycheck. I was thriving. I was building. Liam and I grew incredibly closer during this time, bonding over our shared experience of betrayal and the profound sense of deception. He had finally quit the biotech research job he hated and was using his portion of Grandma's restitution to start his own sustainability consulting firm, something he was genuinely passionate about. "I never wanted to be in biotech," he admitted during one of our weekly dinners, a genuine lightness in his eyes. "I only did it because Dad pushed so hard, and I thought it would make them proud. What a waste of 10 years. For the first time since childhood, I saw real joy in my brother's eyes, a genuine spark. Sophie was struggling more than either of us. As the youngest, she had been the most sheltered from our parents' financial realities, and the revelations hit her hardest, especially when she learned that her graduate program in environmental science, which our parents had been relentlessly pressuring her to quit, was actually fully funded by Grandma's original trust. "I almost dropped out last semester because Mom kept saying it was too expensive," she told me tearfully one afternoon. "I was ready to give up my dream, my entire future, because they lied about money that was literally designated for my education." With Grandma's unwavering support, Sophie continued her program with renewed focus and determination. The three of us grandchildren, Liam, Sophie, and I, we formed our own support system, meeting regularly, often without our parents' knowledge. We were a unit, rebuilding trust and connection among ourselves, a true family emerging from the ashes. As for Mom and Dad, their financial house of cards had indeed collapsed. 2 months after the fateful dinner, they were forced to put their house on the market. The bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings, and selling was their only option to avoid complete financial ruin. The new Tesla was repossessed. The vacation condo was surrendered. The credit card companies were calling daily, relentlessly. I didn't witness any of this firsthand. My information came primarily through Liam, who maintained minimal, strained contact with them. I still wasn't ready to face them, my anger too raw, the betrayal too fresh, too painful. 3 months after the dinner, I received a letter from Mom. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery, probably purchased during their years of excess. "Chloe," it began, "we know we've hurt you deeply, and no apology can undo the damage we've caused. But we hope you can find it in your heart to give us a chance to explain ourselves fully." The letter went on for several pages, detailing their financial struggles, the pressure they felt to maintain appearances, the slippery slope of their first deception that had led to years of lies. It was part explanation, part justification, and only the barest, faintest hint of genuine remorse. What struck me most was what the letter didn't contain. There was no clear acknowledgement of the profound harm they had caused, not just financially, but emotionally. There was no recognition of how they had undermined my independence, my self-confidence, my ability to build a secure future. It was still, at its core, about them, their struggles, their justifications, their pain. I didn't respond. A week later, I met with Grandma Eleanor for our now regular Sunday brunch. She looked concerned as she studied my face over her teacup. "You received Brenda's letter," she stated, rather than asked. I nodded. It was disappointing. "They're still not taking full responsibility," Grandma observed, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "Brenda has always struggled with that. So has David, in his own quiet way." "Did you know?" I asked suddenly, the question lingering in my mind for weeks. "All these years, did you suspect something was wrong?" Grandma sighed heavily, her gaze distant. "I had concerns. Things didn't always add up. Their spending patterns, certain explanations. But I never, ever wanted to believe they would steal from their own children. Perhaps that was my greatest failing, darling. Giving them the benefit of the doubt when the evidence, subtle as it was, suggested otherwise." "It's not your fault, Grandma," I assured her, reaching across the table to hold her hand. "They fooled all of us. They were very, very good at it." "Nevertheless, I should have been more vigilant," she murmured, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I'm sorry, Chloe." Her sincere apology, something my parents had yet to offer, truly brought tears to my eyes. It was a balm to my raw wounds. "What happens now?" I asked, looking out the window, with Mom and Dad. "They found an apartment," Grandma informed me, "much smaller than they're used to. David is still working, though I understand he's been demoted due to performance issues. Brenda has taken a part-time job at a department store, her first paid employment in 20 years. The image of my status-conscious mother, who had always meticulously curated her appearance and social standing, working retail, was difficult to reconcile with the woman who had raised me, yet there was something undeniably appropriate about it, a necessary humbling. "Are you helping them?" I asked, not accusingly, just curious. "Minimally," Grandma admitted. "I've paid 3 months' rent on their apartment to prevent them from becoming homeless, to ensure they have basic shelter. But beyond that basic humanitarian support, no. They need to face the consequences of their actions and rebuild on their own terms, for the first time in their lives." I nodded, relieved that Grandma wasn't enabling their destructive behavior, but still showing a fundamental compassion that was missing from my own heart at that moment. "And what about you, Chloe?" she asked, her gaze gentle. "Are you ready to speak with them?" I considered the question carefully, feeling the weight of it. "Not yet, Grandma. Maybe soon, but not yet. I'm still processing everything. I'm still angry, and I still don't trust them." "Take all the time you need, darling," Grandma said, patting my hand. "Healing can't be rushed. It's a marathon, not a sprint." Months after the dinner revelation, after countless hours of therapy, long conversations with Liam and Sophie, and a lot of quiet reflection, I finally agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, not their home, not mine. They were already waiting when I arrived, both looking years older than when I had last seen them. Mom had lost the polished appearance she had always maintained. Her roots were showing, her clothes were off the rack rather than designer, and she wore minimal makeup. Dad's confident posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a defeated, weary man. "Thank you for coming," Dad said, his voice hesitant as I sat down across from them. "We weren't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, my voice flat, holding their gaze. "But I have some things I need to say to you." They nodded, exchanging nervous glances, bracing themselves. "What you did wasn't just financially damaging," I began. My voice studied, controlled, despite the turbulent emotions churning inside me. "You undermined my independence. You watched me struggle when you could have helped. You stole years of financial security from me, years I can never get back." Mom started to speak, a sob catching in her throat, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "I'm not finished. The worst part isn't even the money. It's the betrayal of trust. You're supposed to be the people I can count on most in this world, and you used me. You lied to my face repeatedly for years. You manipulated me, you gaslit me into thinking I was wrong or ungrateful, and then you had the audacity to blame me for being Grandma's favorite when you were caught." Tears streamed down Mom's face, silent now, but I continued, unwavering. "I don't recognize you anymore. I don't know who you are. The parents I thought I had would never have done these things. They would never have sacrificed their children's future for their own pride and appearances. We made terrible mistakes," Dad acknowledged, his voice breaking, tears in his own eyes. "We lost ourselves somewhere along the way, became people we never meant to be. We got greedy, maybe, desperate." "We want to make amends, Chloe," Mom added desperately, her voice hoarse. "We know we can't repay the money, not anytime soon, but we want to rebuild our relationship with you. We miss you." I studied them, searching for genuine remorse, for something that went beyond just regret for their consequences. There was pain there, certainly, in their eyes, in their slumped postures. But how much of that pain was for their actions? And how much was simply for the consequences of those actions? I couldn't tell. "I need time," I said finally, picking up my coffee cup, my voice resolute. "And actions, not just words. Show me you've changed through consistent behavior over time. Show me you understand the damage you caused, not just to your finances, but to us, to me. That's the only way forward I can see right now." It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that, not by a long shot. But it was a door left slightly ajar, a possibility for the future, if they were willing to do the hard, excruciating work of genuine change. As I left the coffee shop, walking out into the crisp autumn air, I felt lighter somehow. I had spoken my truth. I had set my boundaries. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free. I had taken control of my own narrative. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights, a sense of peace settling over me. My phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Proud of you for meeting them today. How are you feeling?" I thought about it for a moment before responding, like I'm finally starting my real life. And in many ways, I was. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, I stood in my new studio space, surveying the clean lines, abundant natural light, and state-of-the-art equipment with a sense of quiet pride. With Grandma Eleanor's steadfast financial support and my own relentless hard work, Chloe Hayes' digital marketing had not just recovered but was thriving. I had hired 2 full-time employees, moved into a professional, inspiring space, and landed several major new clients who genuinely valued my expertise. Life had taken on a rhythm that felt both new and authentically mine. Sunday brunches with Grandma were sacred, cherished time. Weekly dinners with Liam and Sophie strengthened our sibling bond, a connection forged in the crucible of shared betrayal. My calendar was filled with client meetings, creative workshops, and even the occasional date, aspects of life I had completely neglected during years of financial struggle and overwhelming stress. My relationship with my parents remained complicated. We had established limited contact, occasional texts, brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays, and one carefully navigated dinner at a neutral restaurant. They were trying in their way. Mom had joined a financial management support group, attending meetings religiously. Dad was seeing a therapist, finally acknowledging his long-standing issues with codependency and fear of confrontation. They lived modestly now, in their small apartment, working jobs that barely covered their expenses. They were facing their reality without a financial safety net. "It's strange," I told Grandma during one of our brunches, swirling my tea. "Part of me still loves them because they're my parents. They are my parents. But I don't trust them. And I'm not sure I ever will again." "Trust, once broken, is the most difficult thing to rebuild, darling," Grandma observed, her gaze empathetic. "It requires consistent truth-telling over a very long time. They're at the very beginning of that journey." "Do you think they can change?" I asked. "Really change? Fundamentally?" Grandma considered the question carefully, her eyes thoughtful. "People can change, Chloe, when the pain of remaining the same becomes too great. Your parents have certainly experienced that pain. Whether it's enough to transform them fundamentally, that remains to be seen. It's a choice they have to make, every single day." In the months since the revelation, Grandma had implemented a new system for financial gifts to her grandchildren. Everything was transparent, meticulously documented, and directly managed, with no intermediaries, no opportunities for misappropriation. "I should have done this years ago," she admitted one day, a rare moment of regret in her otherwise resolute demeanor. "But I trusted Brenda and David to honor their responsibilities as parents. That was my mistake, and I regret it deeply." With the financial support I should have had all along, I was able to focus entirely on growing my business rather than merely surviving. The chronic stress that had been my constant companion for years gradually receded, replaced by a newfound confidence in my future, in my own capabilities. Liam had undergone a similar transformation. Free from the golden handcuffs of his high-pressure biotech career, he had discovered a genuine passion for helping small businesses develop sustainable, ethical models. His consulting firm was small but growing steadily, and for the first time since childhood, I saw real joy, a true spark of contentment, in my brother's eyes. "I never knew work could be this satisfying," he told me over drinks one evening, a wide grin on his face. "I actually look forward to Mondays now. How weird is that?" Sophie had perhaps changed the most of all of us. The shy, people-pleasing youngest child had found her voice. She stood up to our parents when they tried to guilt her about not visiting more often or not calling enough. She excelled in her graduate program, receiving multiple accolades. She even started dating someone our mother would definitely not approve of, a kind-hearted tattoo artist with a gentle soul. "I spent my whole life trying to make Mom and Dad proud," she confided during one of our sibling dinners, a wry smile on her face. What a complete waste of energy that was. As for Grandma Eleanor, she had emerged from the ordeal with a renewed sense of purpose, a fierce determination. At 79, she had revamped her entire approach to family wealth, establishing transparent trusts, clear documentation, and direct lines of communication with each of her grandchildren. "The silence around money in this family ends with my generation," she declared during one of our meetings, her voice firm. "Financial literacy is a gift I should have given you all much, much sooner." 1 year after the fateful dinner, we gathered at Grandma's house for a new tradition, a family meeting that included only the four of us: Grandma, Liam, Sophie, and me. Our parents were not invited. "I've been thinking about legacy," Grandma began once we were settled in her bright sunroom, the afternoon light streaming in. "Not just financial legacy, but ethical legacy. What values do we want to carry forward in this family?" Over several hours, we talked openly and honestly about money, trust, communication, and boundaries. We established clear guidelines for how we would handle family resources and relationships moving forward, ensuring transparency and accountability. We acknowledged the trauma we had experienced, the deep wounds, and committed to breaking the cycle of financial secrecy and manipulation that had plagued our family for so long. "I propose a toast," Grandma said, raising her glass as we finished dinner, the clink echoing softly. "To the Hayes family, reimagined, rebuilt, and resilient." As I raised my glass, I realized how much I had grown over the past year. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead forced me to examine my own values, to set clear boundaries, and to build a life based on truth rather than illusion. The money that had been restored to me was significant. Yes, a huge financial cushion. But the self-respect I had gained, the clarity of purpose, that was truly priceless. I had learned to stand firm in my worth, to require honesty from those around me, and to walk away from relationships that undermined my well-being, even when those relationships were with my own parents. I had also learned the true meaning of family, not the performative, image-driven version my parents had cultivated, but the authentic support and unconditional love that Grandma modeled, and that my siblings and I were now actively building among ourselves. 2 years after the dinner revelation, I sat in my thriving studio, reviewing designs for a major new client, a sense of deep satisfaction permeating every corner of my being. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Thinking of you today, Chloe. Hope your presentation goes well. Love, Mom." It was a small thing, remembering my important presentation, sending a simple message of support without demands or guilt. But it represented the kind of consistent, respectful, if still guarded communication we had established as our new normal. I texted back, "Thanks, I'll let you know how it goes." Not warm, not effusive, but honest. That was all I could offer now, and they had, finally, learned to accept it. Later that evening, as I celebrated the successful presentation with my team, a quiet joy bubbling up inside me, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed since that dinner 2 years ago. The path had been painful, arduous even, filled with grief and anger, but the destination? It was worth every single step. A life built on truth, surrounded by people I could truly trust, doing work I passionately loved. The money that had been stolen from me had been returned, yes, but the real restoration was in my spirit. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, a resilience that could weather even the deepest betrayal, and the courage to rebuild my life entirely on my own terms. That night, I called Grandma to share the news about my successful presentation. "I'm so proud of you, Chloe," she said warmly, her voice full of genuine affection. "Not just for your professional success, but for the woman you've become." "I learned from the best," I told her sincerely, my voice thick with emotion. After we hung up, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the shimmering city lights. The woman who had discovered her parents' betrayal 2 years ago felt like a different person. Younger, more naive, defined by financial struggle and family expectations. The woman I was now stood firmly on her own foundation, financially secure, emotionally resilient, surrounded by authentic relationships, choosing her own path. The betrayal had nearly broken me. Instead, it had remade me. And for that, strangely enough, I was profoundly grateful. So tell me, have you ever discovered a profound betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? What did you learn from the experience, and how did it change you? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you a glimmer of hope or courage, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest betrayals can ultimately lead to growth and renewal. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes, losing what you thought you had is just the beginning of finding something truly invaluable.